So it looks like it slowed down, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's session on SPARC, an update to the subawards. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I am Bree Tier. I am one of the contracting team managers here in the Office of Sponsor Programs. My team is responsible for the bulk of outgoing subawards from the university for sponsored research. And I'm joined by Colette, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Colette DeJacque-John. I'm working in the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research as a subcontractor concierge, so working with OSP and various partner departments to try to improve the execution of subawards.
All right, and then we're just going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so our topics for today are: why are things changing with subs? What is changing with subs? The sub-agreement pre-drafting action and response certification, which is known as SPARC. We're going to go over the different steps in the SPARC process and provide some tips for a smooth process with subs and the resources that are available. So why are things changing? With the current SIP process, we've identified some issues. Projects are often complex, and current setup does not allow for knowledge continuity of the project. Different contracting officers may work with a particular project over the multiple years that it's in play. Sub-agreement documents are uploaded to Ramses at proposal stage with progress reports by the department. And when initiating the SIP, the departments have to link the documentation that was previously provided in Ramses, resulting in a duplication of effort. There's a lot of uploading and downloading and relinking. Information on the SIP may not match the linked documents, or there may be a lack of clear information that causes an increased back and forth between OSP and the department for clarification and updates, and that causes further delays. And then often the SIP submissions are delayed, leading to an increased urgency with the requests. So what's changing? With the SPARC process, we're trying to allow for greater efficiency. So each of the departments is going to have an assigned contracting officer in the same manner as the SPS. So that'll allow for a greater knowledge continuity.
Sorry, Colette, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did want to just interject here just to make sure that everybody is aware that assigned contracting officer will be for outgoing subawards only. It will not pertain to any other types of agreements that a contracting officer may handle.
When there's a change in Connect Carolina, so with a sub-agreement, when there's a change with the award, and there's a change in Connect Carolina resulting in a project change notification related to a sub-agreement project ID, that will automatically spin off and initiate a RAM tracker. OSP will initiate the SPARC rather than a SIP having to be initiated on the department side. When that change is made, and the project change notifications are initiated basically on changes to dates or dollars in Connect Carolina related to that subcontract project ID. The SPARC will include clarifying questions relating to the documentation and the action for more targeted and project-specific requests. And OSP will route the SPARC to the department, attaching those most recent documents for the subrecipient that are found in Ramses. So a lot of the front-end work is going to be on the OSP side. So if there's no change in Connect Carolina, what's your next step? So if you need to issue a modification to a subrecipient and have not received a SPARC, you can check the RAM Tracker transparency for a pending action. If the RAM Tracker transparency does not indicate an open action, the request will need to be emailed to ospsubs@unc.edu. The instances when the department would need to initiate the SPARC is if there's a change to a sub-agreement that's not related to dates or dollars that have been processed through Connect Carolina utilizing the required documents matrix for outgoing subawards. Please provide the documents outlined in the matrix as well as the action being requested. The SPARC will be initiated for department review. So if you have a subrecipient or a UNCPI change, if there's an early termination, if there's a deobligation and the budget revision hasn't been completed, resulting in a project change notification, if there's additional terms or conditions, changes to reporting requirements, or an update to a subrecipient entity name. Those are some of the situations, but not all. This is not an exhaustive list that could result in the department needing to issue that request. Once the request is received by OSP subs, then a SPARC will be sent to the department for the action.
All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual whys behind the different pieces of the SPARC form and the different review statuses that you may see on RAM Tracker Transparency. So the first status that is going to be seen if you see an open RAM tracker that you're looking for is contracting coordinator review. So this is a new status that we've created with the SPARC. And our contracting coordinator, for those of you who have submitted SIPs, you've probably worked with Jessica Senefield. She's our contracting coordinator. So currently she is the one that receives the SIPs and does the initial setup. Moving forward, she will be the one that receives the RAM tracker for the SPARC that needs to be issued. She's going to review that project notification or project change notification. She's going to also review the prime award RAM tracker action. So what I mean by that is the SPS, as they are setting up a project, they're making notes in that RAM tracker for that prime award. She's going to go in and she's going to review that action to see, are there any notes about anything that need to be pulled over into the subaward? If it was a budget revision, she's going to look to see, are there any notes that need to be pulled over from that budget revision? And then just any that appear to be related to the current action. So what I mean by that is if we're issuing additional funding, she's going to go into the most recent IPF and Ramsey's and look to see if she can see a subrecipient budget in that IPF, and she's going to pull that over. She's not doing the actual review of those documentations at this point. She's just going to do the initial gathering. So just a note for efficiency and clarity, it's important that documents are identifiable. So when talking about Jessica pulling in those documents, if there's no notice in or there's no identifier in the name of the document, then she's not going to know that she needs to pull that in for that particular subrecipient. So one of the best practices is to ensure that the subrecipient name or initials are in the document name and that the document type is clearly identified. So budget, SOW for scope of work, LOI for letter of intent, so on and so forth. Another thing is if the subrecipient's budget has changed from the original proposed budget, updated subrecipient documents should be uploaded with the RPPR. I know that that's not a requirement, but just know that if they're not uploaded at that point, it will delay the issuance of the modification, because though they're not required for an RPPR, they are required for obligating new funding. So if the original budget is there and it matches the current amount, then we're okay to move forward with that budget document. But if that original proposed budget amount has changed, then we're going to need some updated documentation. So another thing that's changing with the SPARC, we can go to the next slide, please, is with initial subawards, a lot of the research administrators on campus are aware that one of the forms that we do require is a research subjects and data transfer form. What we're finding is a lot of times those research administrators aren't the people that have that information and they can't provide it to us. So they're going back and forth between the UNC project team to try and gather that information. And ultimately, it's slowing down the process. So what we're going to do is we're actually, and we have been piloting this, and it's been working quite well, is we are going to start sending the research subjects and data transfer form. And by we, I mean the contracting coordinator at this point in time. So when she receives that initial RAM tracker and it's an initial award, she's going to initiate that email off to the PI, asking them to complete the research subjects and data transfer form. They can ask one of the members of the study or project team to complete that. We just ask that when that is returned, that we know that the PI has confirmed that that information is correct. We are going to be copying the PS project ID managers on those emails so that you are aware that that information is required for that particular action. And as we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, we're not able to approve a SPARC until that is received back. So foreign subrecipients, the contracting coordinator is going to go ahead and review foreign travel warnings and currency exchange rate and initiate that email to the PI as well. So the reason that these reviews are done, just for everybody's knowledge, is to ensure that the scope of work is not impacted by any changes. So we capture the original exchange rate for that particular subrecipient at the beginning of the project. And if that exchange rate varies more than 10%, there's a chance that it could have an impact to the project. And so what we have to do is reach out to the PI and confirm whether or not they're able to move forward with the scope of work as is with the exchange rate variance. And same thing for the foreign travel. If a particular project required that students go in and out of a particular area and the foreign travel warnings are of such that it's unsafe to travel, then that would probably impact the scope of work. And so the PI may need to look at something different. So that sort of thing is what we're trying to ask the PI to review and confirm. And again, as I mentioned before, we can't draft these sub-agreements until they have been returned to us. And the reason for that is because that information is part of the overall compliance review, and the research subjects and data transfer form could alter the terms and conditions of the award. So going into actually what the SPARC is going to look like a little bit and kind of some of the fields. And I did want to point out really quickly that this presentation is not meant to be a training on how to use SPARC. We did do an overview on that recently. And I know that it's going to be available on the website. This is going to be more of why certain information is required, because I know that we get a lot of those types of questions, not understanding why we need certain information. So when the contracting officer receives the SPARC RAM tracker from the contracting coordinator, and they're ready to initiate the SPARC to the department, they're going to go through, they're going to review those documents that we talked about earlier. They're going to review that notice of award and any other applicable notes that they need to look at. They're going to update all of the fields within the SPARC, and you'll see a few screenshots throughout here. Again, not many, because this was not meant to be a training on the SPARC, just more of some background of the why. They're going to add the notes. And this is where I really want to focus for a moment, is right below where you see instructions, there is notes. And there's note type created by, created on, and a little plus sign. The little plus sign, you can add notes. You will see notes coming from Paul's contracting coordinator, contracting officer, departments can add notes. What we want to make sure of is that anything that you know of that's related to this project that you feel like is pertinent for the contracting officer to be able to draft the agreement appropriately, or any information that you just feel like would be helpful for them to know about the project, the subaward, the subrecipient, use that note field. More information is always better. We can always, read it. And if it's not something that we feel like we need, then it's there for anybody else that may feel like it's helpful. There will be questions there that are asked of the department when you receive the the SPARC. See, old habits die hard. But I want you to make sure that you really focus on that note area. It is a very important piece of the overall puzzle. It helps us get the clear picture. So the next slide. So the department PS project ID managers will receive an email from OSP subs. It is an auto email, and that'll have a link to the SPARC form. The appropriate department person will complete, review, and certify. So what we mean by that is a lot of departments have multiple PS project ID managers listed in Ramsey's. We are not able to determine who in the department needs to receive a specific SPARC. So the SPARC will automatically automatically go to the PS project ID managers, and then the department can determine, are you broken up by PI? Are you broken up by a department subset? You know, how is that done in the department? And then that person can do the review. If for some reason it's a situation to where you feel like a project manager, a research coordinator, anyone that does not have access to the form needs to be the person to review, or you just want them to review a section, you can send an email to OSP subs with the name and email address of the individuals needing access. It does default to read write access. So if for some reason it's someone that you feel like you are worried they need to review something, but you don't want them to actually submit it, you can ask for read only access. So the next slide is just going to show you an example of what the email is going to look like, what information is provided in that email. So you'll see at the top is some identifying information, and then it just tells you that a project notification has been generated. And in order to begin the sub-agreement process, we will need you to follow the link to create or complete the SPARC form. And then at the very bottom, you'll see the link. It says RAM Tracker, and it is through our RAM Tracker module in Ramsey. So the next slide is just going to show you a little bit about what it looks like on the department side when you do click that link. So on the left-hand side screenshot, you're going to see at the very left, you've got SPARC forms, awaiting department certification, pending OSP review, and approved. So when you click that SPARC link, that left-hand screenshot is what you'll see. Once you select any of those particular options, the right screenshot is what you will see depending upon which bucket you select, so to speak. So this particular one, we're looking at awaiting department certification. And what that means is the department has action that needs to be taken and it needs to be reviewed, completed, and sent back to OSP. Pending OSP review, those are SPARCs that have been certified and submitted by the department, but have not yet been approved by the contracting officer. And then approved SPARCs are going to be your SPARCs that have been approved by OSP, and they're ready for drafting, negotiation, et cetera, with the subrecipients. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, we talked a little bit earlier about the research subjects and data transfer form. So at the very top of any initial SPARC you receive, you will notice that this particular drop-down is there. You won't have a drop-down, you will have a statement. So what the contracting officer is going to do is, at the time that they send the SPARC to the department, they're going to review to see, have we received that form back from the PI or project team member yet? If we have, it will say the RSVP form has been completed. It'll be attached to the RAM Tracker if you have any questions that you want to look at. If we haven't received it back, then it will say it's outstanding, and it reminds you that we're unable to issue the agreement until it's been received, and to please work with your PI to expedite this requirement. So all initial agreements do include language related to human subjects, animal subjects, and if there is human subject data transfer, we also try to include that language in our sub-agreements whenever possible to prevent duplication of effort and duplication of agreements. So again, that's why we're asking all of the information. So it may seem like it's kind of a pain, but ultimately it does save time in the long run to combine those terms when possible. So we did talk about the form will be completed by the PI or member of the study team. And again, that's to ensure that a proper understanding of what's being done is clearly laid out so that we can ensure that those terms are correct. So the next thing we're going to look at is another area in the form, project begin and end date, budget begin and end date, and then the amount funded this action or total anticipated project amount. So first, I did want to highlight that this particular screenshot is from an initial. For amendments, you won't see the anticipated project amount or your project date. You're only going to see your amount funded this action and your budget date. but it just gives a little bit of description below of what each of the fields are. So the project begin and end date, I did want to highlight, I know there's been some concern from some departments over time where they reach out and they say, well, but we may not end up working with the subrecipient this long. This is what we think we're going to do, but it may not be that way. That's okay, providing the overall anticipated project dates are important because it is a component of uniform guidance. Actually, all of these fields are a component of uniform guidance. And whether or not the project is federal, we do try to remain consistent across our awards. And so that is one of the ways that we try to remain consistent is by receiving that information regardless of the sponsor. It also helps for subrecipients to kind of plan their projects, to plan their PI's efforts, so on and so forth. So the project beginning end date and the total anticipated project amount, neither of those fields contractually obligate us to anything. The fields that do are the amount funded this action and the current budget date. So once we issue those, we've obligated to ourselves to those. And unless we're past the end date and past the final invoice date, we're still contractually obligated for those dates and dollars. So the next section, we've got some contact information at the top. We just wanted to highlight the subrecipient contact and contact email. Those are typically the department representative here. It's your contact at the subrecipient. So a lot of times it's the department equal on the other side. The central office email, whenever possible, try to include a central inbox. We've noticed an increase of entities where individuals are no longer with that subrecipient. And so we end up with a lot of returned emails when we don't have those central inboxes. So we do have a database that we're capturing those. So the hope is long term, we wouldn't have to ask everyone to continue to provide that. But in the meantime, we do need that. We do need to be able to ensure that it gets to the correct inbox. Even when it seems like we may have the correct one, a lot of entities have multiple central inboxes. And so this also helps to make sure that we get it to the correct central inbox for this particular project. And then the next thing we wanted to highlight is for our foreign subrecipients and community collaborators, we know that there are times where they're unable to cash flow the project and they may require cash advances. So up to 25% of the current obligated funding amount for the current budget period is allowable without a justification. Anything 25.1% and greater does require a written justification that's reviewed by OSP leadership. And there may be additional questions that need to be answered to ensure that we are providing a cash advance that makes sense. There may be tweaks to the percentage, that sort of thing, but typically we are going to try to work with everyone if it is a foreign or a community collaborator to try and make those things happen. We just need to understand some of the reasonings, you know, whether it's because they don't have the cash flow, and obviously a lot of times that's dependent upon the location, the country that they're in, so on and so forth. And then a cash advance can be requested for each subsequent action. So this particular question you will see now on both initial agreements and modifications. Okay. The next thing we wanted to highlight is for initial agreements, the contracting officer will be reviewing the documentation that is available and trying to make the determination whether or not the agreement should be our typical standard, which is cost reimbursable, if it's a fixed rate per patient award or a deliverables installment-based project. They're going to review that documentation. They're going to select the option that they believe that the documentation is leaning towards. And then we ask you to confirm, is this how the PI anticipates paying invoices? So it's really important that however the agreement is written, for the subrecipient, those invoices that are received, approved, and paid, that they match the same type. So if we have a cost reimbursable award, we should be paying on a cost reimbursable basis. We should not be paying deliverables on a cost reimbursable award. We would want to make sure that that's clear. It does end up causing a little bit of back and forth for our post-audit group when that happens. And then also, are there any specific reporting templates required by the sponsor or for the project? So if there's any particular, if you have a clinical trial that you're enrolling in, or a study that you're enrolling in, and there's a particular reporting template that subrecipient needs to fill out, it could be a financial reporting template that you're aware of. Anything that you're aware of, if you can provide it there. And one more thing on the payment type, I also wanted to just mention that if it's a fixed rate and per patient, if you've got a fixed rate per patient component and a cost reimbursable, like effort-based component, currently speaking, the FDP templates for federal projects do not support a hybrid model. It sounds as though they may be looking towards that in the future, but currently speaking, if you do have those two different mechanisms, it does require two separate project IDs. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that.
Okay, this particular screenshot is part of the SPARC form. The contracting officer for this particular action is going to be listed, and they're also the current owner on the RAM tracker. There's two different fields for financial contacts. There's the department financial contact, which is the person who's going to be listed in the sub-agreement as the individual who will receive financial inquiries relating to this action. The department financial central inbox or email address for receiving invoices. We believe it's a best practice to have like a department central inbox in case that the department financial contact or any other individual who may be a PS project ID manager is no longer with the department or has changed job duties or job functions. If we have a central inbox for the invoices to go, we feel that they'll probably be handled a little bit faster and more efficiently. The SPARC review by department. So at the end of the SPARC submission, it'll take you to a certification screen. And the certifications are there to confirm that the PI is aware and in agreement of any of the budgetary dates or term changes provided in the SPARC. The PI is ultimately responsible for the project and should be aware and in agreement. So we just want to make sure that that box has been checked. We also want to remind the submitter that any incomplete fields or discrepancies in the information provided will delay the initiation of the sub-agreement. If the discrepancies or missing information is found when the contracting officer reviews the SPARC, it'll be returned to the department. So the final approved SPARC is when the contracting officer, or is what the contracting officer will use to draft the sub-agreement action. So it's imperative that all the fields are complete and accurate to ensure that the sub-agreement includes all appropriate terms and contains the correct information. Now, a return SPARC, if the contracting officer determines that the SPARC and the documentation do not match or provide enough information to draft the sub-agreement request, the SPARC will be returned to the department with additional notes. Inside the SPARC, it will go back to the awaiting department certification queue that Bree pointed out earlier, and the status on the RAM tracker will be changed to return to department. A revoked SPARC. There may be situations where as soon as the contracting officer submits the SPARC to the department, they may realize that there was a component missing or there was something that needed to be added. They can revoke the SPARC so that it comes back to them and is not actionable by the department at that time. Once the correction is made, the SPARC will be routed back again to the department. For an approved SPARC, once the contracting officer reviews it, reviews the input, checks that all the fields are completed and the documents match the action and that they have sufficient information, the SPARC will be approved and moved to the approved queue. If the PI has not returned the RSDT or the approved foreign warnings, the SPARC substatus will be selected and the SPARC will not be approved until they are received. So that will remain a pending action. OSP must have the information for research subjects and data transfer and for the foreign warnings to ensure terms are included in the sub-agreement. Checking the status of your SPARC. So you can check the status at any time using the RAM Tracker Transparency Search in Ramses. If you've reviewed the current status of the SPARC and you've checked the notes on the RAM Tracker, reviewed any emails, and you still have questions, you can contact the contracting officer listed on your SPARC and you can copy in OSP subs. So we have some tips for a smooth process. Check your work. I mean, that's one that it seems really obvious, but it seems to be a good practice to open every document before you submit it, just to ensure that the information matches the action and you have the most updated version. I think this is especially applicable to budgets. Be sure to upload new or updated subrecipient documents in Ramsey so that they're readily available to OSP. And as Bree mentioned before, if you can use a naming convention on those documents that are uploaded into Ramses that include the subrecipient's name or maybe their initials and identify what the document is, SOW, budget, LOI. It helps the contracting coordinator, Jessica, to more easily identify what the document is and be able to attach that to the RAM tracker. Again, if your department has a general inbox that is regularly monitored, it may be the most effective option for the department financial contact for subawards. And this sounds kind of basic, but copy pasting email addresses rather than typing them. We're all human, and an error in an email address can cause a delay in the subaward execution. Emails will bounce back if they're incorrect, or they won't go to the correct entity or person and get action quickly. And when in doubt, spell it out. The more specific and detailed the information provided to OSP, the less clarification will be required later. And in this instance, I think we're referring to just using the notes field, providing as much information. We want to make sure that there's clarity and a full understanding of what's being requested.
All right. The last thing that we wanted to kind of highlight, and we want to, I'm going to go through this really quickly so that we can leave some time for questions. The matrix of required documents is one of the resources available. The website is being updated, and we'll have additional resources on there as well with some updated FAQs. A couple of the things I did want to highlight is that on the matrix of required document, historically, this got changed again. So we will update this again, but historically speaking, some of the things that have been listed, carryover is one of the things. We don't always need a detailed budget for that, depending on the situation. And we'll spell that out a little bit more on the documentation that we provide on the website. So with that, I just wanted to go ahead and allow some time for questions, because I think we are getting some, and I want to make sure that we are able to answer as many as possible.
Great, thank you, Bree and Colette. Y'all did a wonderful job, and we do have a few questions. So one of the most prevalent has been, when will SPARC go into effect?
Oh, isn't that the question of the day? So it is about this close to being ready. We were hoping it was going to go live right after symposium. Unfortunately, our developers are going to be away at a conference the first week and a half of October. And we don't want them to roll it out and us have no support if something doesn't go right. So with that being said, we're hoping sometime soon after they come back. So hopefully sometime in October.
Great, thank you. Another question that's related to that is if they need special access to prepare the SPARC.
So as long as you're listed as a PS Project ID manager, you'll automatically get that email and you'll be able to click the link and fill out that information. If you're not a PS Project ID manager and should be included on all SPARCs for that department or even a group of SPARCs, you may want to reach out to your backbone manager and get added. If it's just for a particular project, someone who receives it can reach out to OSP subs and ask that that person be added.
Great, thank you. So another one pertains to the notes field, and they're asking if they should add the urgency and the justification for the urgency in that field.
So I would say that it kind of depends on how urgent it is, to be quite honest, because especially at the beginning, we know that there's always going to be bumps in the road with any new thing that rolls out. I would say moving forward, we would hope that that would be the case, but currently I would say the continuing process of emailing OSP subs if there's a particular reason for urgency about a specific project is going to get the quickest eyes on a request for urgency. So
Great, thank you.
With that being said, I think that it should also be added there, but if there's a true request for urgency, I would say that it's best to also email OSP subs.
Thank you. So another one is, now that foreign subs are also required to provide additional documentation for annual review, will the sub team request those, or will that come from the SPS?
So I know that the export control office, along with our office, is still working on all of the guidance depending upon final decision. I know they just updated recently that it was going to be pushed to January and some small tweaks. We will be including language in the sub agreement that it's required, and we will be including language in the new LOI that it's required. In terms of who is actually asking for that information, that I couldn't tell you how that process would work. I would assume that that would probably be more from the PR study team. But I don't know.
So more to come on that one. Thank you. So another one is, they manage a multi-sub project, and the subs weren't known at the time of the proposal or award. And once they've been chosen and they have all the documents from the subs, how do they initiate the process to get their sub agreement going?
So the same way as always, you would still submit your prior approval request form through your SPS to get the project ID set up. Once those project IDs are set up, once the SPARC is live, so not currently, but once the SPARC is live, that would spin off RAM trackers because there would have been a change. There would have been a new sub-award project ID created. Currently speaking, the SIP is still live and still the way to submit requests.
Thank you. So with the new system, what is the expected turnaround time for the new subs and the amendments?
That really depends on how quickly the departments reply to the information and how quickly we're able to, come to an agreement that what we have is what we need. That depends upon the turnaround time from the subrecipient. So that's not an answer that can be just from our group. So our group is not the only responsible party when it comes to timeframes for subawards.
Thank you. And then another one is, SIPs are currently processed by the date of submission, and there may be a lag due to volume, and they're asking if the delays will carry over and when the timestamp will start running. So
the timestamp is the same as it will be now. Once all of the documentation is received from the department and we're able to move forward. So currently the departments, if they submit a request, and they can submit it at the beginning of August, but if we don't have all of the information, we've asked for additional information and we haven't received that back, we can't move it forward. So we can't move it forward until we have everything that we need to draft the agreement.
Great, thank you. And then that's the only questions that we have right now. If anyone does think of any other questions, you can email the sub team, or you can submit them for review in the submit question form on the symposium website. Oh, we do have a couple more that come in. One of them is, can SPARC requests be located after submission for review by the submitter? Can previous SPARC requests be copied for the next modification?
So no, in terms of the previous request being copied, because it is specific to that project notification that occurs. So there's most of the information is going to be filled in by the contracting officer based on what they've received. So the department is going to be filling in the contact information for the most part, and verifying a few things, but there's really not going to be anything that we would want to copy over, because we want to make sure that that particular action is being reviewed. I think that's one of the problems that we've had historically, is a lot of times we're trying to use old documents and old information, and ultimately it changes faster than anybody could imagine on the other side. So in terms of being located for review after the submitter, yes. So that is those two different SPARC boxes we talked about. So you've got the one where it's waiting for the department to do their piece. You've got the section where it's waiting for OSP to review, and then the approved. So in any of those buckets, you can see the current status and review the previous submission.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that joined us today. We are out of time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And I really appreciate Bree and Colette. This was a wonderful presentation about SPARC. We're really excited.